By the end of the 30s, the old monsters were beginning to lose their impact. We now found humor in the master of horror himself, Bela Lugosi. We knew the truth even if the Ritz brothers didn't. The gorilla had a zipper down his back. Other films followed. They revealed that the old sinister characters and situations had been made laughable by the real horror of a very real war. Werewolves, vampires, and mad scientists continued to populate B-movies in the 40s, but increasingly they had become old hat.
I work in the new. I was almost insane with joy.
To attract additional and more sophisticated audiences, a new kind of horror film began to appear. It was in 1944 that Bluebeard was released.
Searching everywhere. At last I traced her through the doctor I'd called in for her. He gave me her address. I went there. Outside her door I heard laughter. But what laughter? It was then I really saw her. She invited me in. She wasn't the same Jeanette. This was the real Jeanette. A low, coarse, loathsome creature. She offered me money. I suppose she thought she could repay me with money. Suddenly the sight of that Jeanette did something to me. Something indescribably infuriating. I thought they would stop her defiling the image I created of her. Stop her degrading my work.
Bluebeard hangs in my memory, not only because I was the star of it, but because it had a depth of characterization, which in that period in Hollywood was not often seen on the screen.
Because when they became Jeanette, I could take out my fury on them. I couldn't kill one.
In the early days of Hollywood, pictures were in black and white. Black and white in more than one way, not only in the character of the film material, but in the plot lines. Everything was either black or white. There were no grays. The villains were just steeped in villainy, and the heroes were just too good to be true. Hollywood grew, and now we have human characters on the screen that have shades of evil and shades of good. And there are grays. It took a while for Hollywood to learn this.
The titles of the films produced by Val Lewton in the early 40s seemed to promise a traditional form of horror. But instead of tales of man-made monsters, vampires, and werewolves, Lewton's films explored the quality of fear itself, the unseen, the dark, the superstitions of the ages, the hidden recesses of the human psyche. These were his subjects. The power of his films derived from what they implied, rather than what they showed. A monster in a Lewton film could otherwise be quite an engaging fellow. A scene from The Body Snatcher, directed by Robert Wise, with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi.
What did they do? 18 people they killed and sold the bodies to Dr. Knox. 10 pounds for a large, 8 for a small. That's good business, Joseph.
Where did they get the people?
That was Hare's End. Oh, you should have seen him on the streets. When he saw some old beldame deep in drink, how he cozened her. Good day to you, Madam Tosspot. And would you like a little glass of something before you take your rest? Come with me to my house, and you shall be my guest. You shall have quarts to drink if you like. How he cozened them.
We can do that. But when you get them there, then what?
Nor did they handle axe or knife to take away their victim's life. No sooner done than in the chest they crammed their lately welcome guest.
I don't understand the song. Tell me plain how they did it.
I'll show you how they did it, Joseph. I'll show you how they burnt them. No! Put your hand down. How can I show you, man? This is how they did it, Joseph.
The A-bomb had fallen. Audiences, conditioned by years of movies, knew the consequences of science unleashed. Here was the spawn, monsters wreaking havoc. From Japan came horror films featuring Godzilla, raging, huge, and pitiless, not to be distracted by any fey ray. Released from a deep freeze by atomic blasts, he was intent only on his deadly mission. And from a menacing outer space came the implacable Ghidra. The 50s were a time of suspicion. As one movie solemnly warned, watch the skies. There were enemies out there. There were enemies everywhere. Mutants resulting from nuclear radiation, out to kill. Weird monsters from other planets, out to destroy. Horror and science fiction merged in films that reflected the daily headlines warning of conspiracies within and imminent attack from without. But monsters were not always easily recognized. In the 1956 Invasion of the Body Snatchers, they took on the familiar forms of your next-door neighbor. At the same time, the monsters in some horror films were becoming more personally connected with an important new audience. One of the first and most successful of these films, I Was a Teenage Werewolf, starring Michael Landon in his first feature film.
When I first started making horror films, it was because I made a film called Crime of Passion, starring Barbara Stanwyck, Sterling Hayden, Raymond Burr. We got great reviews, and the picture opened up and died, and I want to know what happened. So I toured the country. I got out of Hollywood, and I saw what happened and what was happening. And that was the teenagers that were buying the records. It was the teenagers that were leaving the house, getting away from that TV box in the living room. The teenagers wanted to get away from the home. They wanted to get away from their parents. And they went to the cinema. They went to the theater. And they had fun with the horror picture because in my horror films, whether it was I Was a Teenage Werewolf, I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, Blood of Dracula, the teenager they were always against the culprit that was the adult. And that's what the kids felt. And that's why they really had a good time. And they had fun with my pictures.
The lines of demarcation were gradually being drawn between those who wanted their horror straight and those who preferred it to be suggested. A film that brought the issue home, the 1958 production Curse of the Demon, directed by Jacques Tourneur and starring Dana Andrews.
Yes, these are his too.
Well, you want your hat and coat, don't you, sir?
My coat. Oh, yes. Very forgetful of me. Thank you very much. You passed them. You slipped them in my pocket.
It's 2 minutes of 10. Come on.
We had completed the picture over in England and had returned quite satisfied with the work we had done. And much to our chagrin, when we saw the picture, the producer had put into the picture a mechanical device which had been concocted by the special effects English people and made a real demon which you could see walking through the forest. Which was a tremendous shock to all of us because the Oliver Onions story had ended with the remark, maybe it would be better not to know.
But horror also came from the living. And in Francis Ford Coppola's first feature film, Dementia 13, which he both wrote and directed, it came in a particularly grisly way. An important change had come to horror films. Not all beautiful women were to be saved from love-smitten monsters. Instead, they became the quarry, the hunted, victims of a fate that was all too true to life, death at the hand of a psychotic killer.
It was the beginning of a cult, the beginning of a new era, a new beginning of horror pictures. Hammer, I think, came out of the fact that perhaps on television they couldn't show a lot of blood. They weren't allowed to show that. They weren't allowed to show a lot of sexuality. There was no nudity on television. So perhaps Hammer came out of that taboo. And so I think a new color came, blood came, and a new sexuality, a new sensuality. Of course, because there was nudity. But there was also a sensuality connected to the dark side. And that's something I think that connected with people. The dark side. We all have it. I've never been offered the role of a sweet person. I think it has to do with the fact that perhaps they saw the dark side of me. And I do fit the traditional pictures of the dark woman, the evil lady. I think that's why moviegoers go to see these films. They want to get in touch with that evil side.
In the United States, films that dealt with the dark side received a significant boost from the work of producer-director Roger Corman. Despite limited budgets, he made a series of compelling horror films based on stories by Edgar Allan Poe. They frequently starred such well-known masters of the macabre as Boris Karloff, Basil Rathbone, Peter Lorre. The Poe films helped reaffirm Vincent Price as the reigning prince of films of the dark.
I beg you do not mourn for Juliana. We should celebrate. She has just married a friend of mine. Let the mass begin!
You might hold a little bit longer on the shot of his going under the table and then trim a little bit of the beginning of this shot here. I'd like to hold. Horror stories have been popular throughout all of history. I think there's a reason for that. The experiencing of horror through a motion picture or a story is a cathartic experience. From the movement in the long shot to first coming into the overshoulder. It's a way in which the person can work out and express certain problems within his unconscious mind. We all have had feelings of horror as a child. These feelings have generally been buried. They lay repressed or suppressed in the back of the mind. And when you go to see a horror film and you scream with the audience, you are easing some of the pressure. Now, at the same time, when you do scream, you will very often smile afterwards. Smile or laugh because you know to a certain extent you've been had by the filmmaker. You know that he has manipulated the tools of his craft in order to get the right emotion from you. These are some of the new techniques we're working with here at New World. In our prosthetics department, we're capable of doing almost anything.
I'm not an android. This guy's got a close-up tomorrow, so...
John Buechler is one of the best men in the business, I think. He's the head of our department, and he's created the special effects, the prosthetics, for a number of our films.
Push it over, back to the left a little bit.
In each one of these things, what he's trying to do is to give the audience something to build upon from within themselves.
The brace is slipping.
Try to mime I'm not an android with his mouth.
I'm not an android. I am a human being.
It'll work.
But it's essential to remember that special effects are never an end unto themselves. Special effects are a means to lead the audience into a fuller understanding and appreciation of the film. The goal is not to dazzle the audience with the special effects, although it's nice if you can do that. The goal is to reach the unconscious of the audience and to let them experience, through special effects, emotions and visual sensations on film that cannot be achieved in any other way. When I was doing the Poe films years ago, we had to leave much to the audience's imagination, and I don't think that was necessarily bad. The audience should participate in the film-going process.
The language of horror has been extended. Our most blood-curdling nightmares rendered 1,000 times over. Special effects have brought spectacular new ways of instilling terror. And yet, graphic realism is not new, nor is the debate that it stirs.
The tradition of the Grand Guignol theater, which goes back to the turn of the century and before in France, was always one of presenting gore on stage. I mean, showing it happen, people having their throats ripped open and having a hot burning iron placed on the side of their face or something like that, done with tremendous technical expertise. And this tradition, of course, has been carried over into the horror film.
The essence of enjoying a horror film is in the fact that you, as a spectator, are totally safe. You are secure. What's happening on the screen is not going to happen to you.
Some years ago, I wrote a novel called Psycho about a mass murder. And Alfred Hitchcock made it into a film very effectively, without using overt violence, merely suggesting it on the screen. But times have certainly changed. In the last 20 years, we have nothing but explicit violence in the so-called spatter films today.
The real horror today is not horror films, which are a lot of fun. Teenagers and adults love them because we never get rid of our fears of the dark and fears of the night. The real horror is on the streets today, in every city, in every town. It's on our television news.
If you see a body lying in the street and you've seen it on film as a child and as a young person and as a young adult and as a mature person, it's not a great shock, and it should be.
In recent times, that I think that it has become so excessive, and then it becomes a kind of pornography of blood for its own sake, and of course that does become distasteful.
It's necessary to call the halt somewhere along the line, I feel, and return to the prime virtues of the horror film, the wonder and the fantasy and terror that it evokes.
You can hand somebody a glass of milk, and if the music is right and the setting is right, the audience will jump and scream in the theater.
That the very fact that you don't know is what makes it fearful and makes it mystifying and shocking and can scare the devil out of you.
Our enjoyment of terror derives mainly from movies. But like children at Halloween, we are forever tempted to get up close, to be surrounded by what we most fear.
Fear? Why do people come in here to get scared? What do you do that's going to bring out that fear in the person? What you want to do is you want to put yourselves in the position of what scene you're doing. You are Lizzie Borden. You killed your mother, Jack the Ripper. He killed all these women. Whether you're the Wolfman, whether you're Dracula, whether you're a butcher or
to scare, to be scared. We are able to take either role. for we have all at one time or another had to deal with our own dark.
I was orphaned when I was 3 years old. My father died, and I was sent to an Episcopal orphanage in Peekskill, New York, run by the Episcopal Sisters of St. Mary. They were very sensible women. Lights went out when it was time to go to sleep, and they stayed out until the morning. So I never learned to be afraid of the dark.
My mother told me that I used to have a Halloween skeleton made out of paper in my room, and she was very amused because I loved that skeleton. It represented my fears. But she said that every night before I went to sleep, I would take that and put it outside my room and close the door so that I didn't have to have it with me in the dark.
I remember Mama saying every night, "Good night, children." My brother and I shared the same bedroom. "Good night, children. I'll leave the light on in the hall." And I must have equated that with dark not being good for me.
Dark and light, they exist together, they coexist, and they must be dealt into. The dark side must be.
And suddenly we heard these scratchy noises behind the glass. My grandmother went and opened the curtain, and there pressed against the glass was this frightening face of this young woman with her nose flattened against the glass, her teeth scowling, and her nails going like this on the glass. Well, we're absolutely petrified with fear. I'll never forget how frightening that was. So my grandmother said, "Don't be afraid." And she opened the door, and I could see her as if it happened yesterday. She stood there, and she made this gesture to the girl, opened her embrace. And the girl, the insane girl, came right up to her, and she embraced her. The girl put her head against my grandmother's shoulder. You see, she said, "You must learn one thing, and that is that if you fill your heart with love, there will be no room left in it for fear."
Through the years, the attitude of fans of the old classic horror films has been one of love.
What you see now on the walls is an approximation of my devotion to the horror films of the 30s. These particular frames always remind me of the old theaters where people could go in and lose themselves into another world where people can live for 500 years on human blood, where fantasy reigns supreme. These ghoulies and ghosties, creatures that go bump in the night, the things that make you as a child whistle past the graveyard, these flickering images of cinema, thanks to Karloff, Lugosi, Chaney, Fay Wray in the clutches of King Kong, all the memories of our childhood, of the horror film, of vampires, these things are never going to die, because in the horror film, they are truly deathless, and so are we all.
We have all passed this way before, shivered at these gargoyles and phantoms honed out of our common fears. And yet we go on in a perverse delight to confront what may lie ahead in the dark.
In every horror film, there is a door, and behind that door lurks that which we fear the most. That which we fear in real life, something that lurks behind the closed door in our own mind. It's often the fear of death, the fear of pain. And yet that door must be opened. We must confront our own mortality, our own feeling of inadequacy. And in the best horror films, that door is opened for us. We glimpse the horror, are able to confront it, and walk away with the feeling that from then on we can live with the fear of death or the fear of suffering. We can understand it a little better, and in so doing, understand our own souls.
We have all learned the language of horror. We have shared it, just as we share the nightmares of the child that remains within us all.